Hello, my name is Findlay. I'm from the University of Johannesburg, and I will be presenting my paper for this year's DEFSA conference titled Digital Design Ethics. The paper looks at the design of digital tools as the fourth industrial revolution becomes more prevalent and illustrates the importance of taking human needs into account when designing these tools. So the aim is to exemplify the need for the inclusion of digital design ethics in South African design education. This need is illustrated through examples of poor digital design that is viewed through a behavioral lens. So because design is a socio-technical field, it is essentially inseparable from human development, which also makes it inseparable from the industrial revolutions. This is evident when looking at the focus of how the focus of design has shifted throughout the industrial revolution. So initially in the first and second industrial revolution, design was very production-centered, which means it was focused on understanding the manufacturing and the production methods of products with the aim of mass consumption and mass production. And this then shifts during the third industrial revolution when digital technology is introduced and design becomes more service-based and the consumer is taken into account more. So as we move into the fourth industrial revolution, it is important to debate how the role of design will evolve and the impact this change should have on design education. So next I look at the South African context, as this is the context of design education that this paper addresses. So although South Africa is a country in the global south and it doesn't have the widespread access to internet that we see in the global north, it is still evident that the South African government has taken the global uprising in the fourth industrial revolution into account. So this is visible in a lot of policies and government objectives that have been implemented, but it has become especially evident since the country was hit with COVID-19. So the pandemic has caused this accelerated use of digital tools throughout the country. When we went into our first lockdown in March 2020, non-essential businesses and schools were closed. And although the majority of South African schools were not equipped with 4IR learning tools, the government partnered with various national sectors to allow virtual learning to become a widespread phenomenon. So this included TV and radio stations streaming educational content. There were various network providers that offered zero-rated applications and websites, and this was commonly used within university education, along with free social media platforms. Then, of course, we saw a huge uprising in the use of platforms such as Zoom, also within businesses. And not only that, but there was an overall uprising in recreational use of digital platforms within the country. So it is evident that South Africa will not be left behind by the changes that come with the fourth industrial revolution, which makes reevaluating South African education prevalent. And it is important to here remember that design education is what is going to shape the minds of the people who will essentially create this new digital world that we live in. So while the technological world rapidly progresses, the law actually lags behind. And this creates an interesting phenomenon where the creation and the evolution of the digital world is actually widely unregulated. So as a way of guiding the design outcomes within digital spaces, ethics can be used as a means for making digital design decisions. So the idea of designers being held accountable for the impact that their products have is actually a relatively new concept. In 1971, Victor Papanek first publishes Design for the Real World, which can essentially be summarized with this quote that you are responsible for what you put in the world and you are responsible for the effects that those things have upon the world. And this was then quite a novel concept, but since then has been more widely adopted. And the field of design has been extended from expecting designers to just be people who create products to people that need to be able to gather information. They need to be able to understand the users of their products, and they become advocates for the users of their products. So designers become these mediators between the client, the manufacturer, society, and even the environment, and they therefore end up carrying quite a lot of responsibility, but they can also be seen as people with agency. So it is therefore important for design education to guide the ethical decision-making of young designers in order to illustrate the need for inclusion of digital design ethics within the design curriculum. So the following section looks at ways in which digital design currently actually exploits human behavior. So we as people like to think of ourselves as always making logical decisions, but this is, however, mostly not actually the case. And much of this is due to our thinking system in our brain. The one is a reflective system and the other one is the automatic system. And decisions are often made in our automatic system, which means they are emotional and subconscious, and they are often influenced by feelings that trigger and motivate our behavior. So this means that the actions we perform are not always deliberate, and we therefore don't always think or choose well. And this also means that our behavior can be influenced by design, and that we are therefore nudgeable. So the first human behavior phenomenon that I look at is sticking to the status quo. So this means that humans are most likely to stick to their current circumstances, even when illogical. So whether this is always sitting in the same chair within a classroom or continuing to subscribe to a magazine that one doesn't read. And this results both from subconscious choosing, but also out of the fear of losing what we have already grown accustomed to. And what this means is that a default option presented to a person can act as a very powerful nudge to their behavior. Then similarly, there's this phenomenon called anchoring, which refers to a method of presenting someone with an option or a default, and then knowing that even if they diverge from that option, the choice they make will be closer to the default than if they had chosen without any influence. And essentially what this ends up meaning is that the menu that you present to someone has a very strong influence on the choices they make. So the menus in digital spaces have a big influence on our human behavior. So a few examples here are that, looking for someone to date means swiping through Tinder profiles instead of going to a local bar. Emails are now populated with suggested replies, and it's often also made more difficult to choose options that are misaligned with the platform's intention. So examples here that when you're signing up for something, the process is made a lot easier, whereas where you want to unsubscribe, that button is relatively hidden, or that process is made to be very complicated. So essentially, the designers of these platforms have a big influence on our behavior of interacting with them. Then a further strong influence on our behavior is our need to fit in. And this comes from this fear of failing to conform to what society sees as successful. We end up comparing ourselves a lot to others, and this results in FOMO, the fear of missing out. So, of course, social media is often designed to exploit this vulnerability. So people increasingly judge social approval based on how people interact with them on social media. But other design tools exploit this human tendency as well. So to further increase our FOMO, many of our devices are designed to convey the feeling of urgency all of the time. We receive app notifications that are instant and they are constant, and they are always providing us with this feeling that we are missing out on something. Then digital platforms are also populated with adverts. So just reading an article online now means that you're bombarded with all these other links that are just asking to be clicked on. Then a further example, the design that creates FOMO is also this ability to see if someone has read your message or not. So not only does this cause social anxiety when you're being ignored, when you're being blue ticked, but it also places increased pressure on instant responses. So altogether, what this ends up really meaning is that our time is not our own anymore. Now, the following section, Addiction by Design, draws on a parallel between the design of highly addictive slot machines and the design of digital interfaces. So slot machines create this impulsive interaction through various methods. Time, space, and social identity are completely suspended in the mechanical rhythm and repetitive process of interacting with these machines. And what is called the zone is created by the narrowing of the screen and this visual motion that is constant. And what, interestingly enough, makes these slot machines so addictive is that the outcome is unpredictable, so you keep coming back. And then it's also this phenomenon known as variable rewards. So you're rewarded sometimes, but not always, and that is also unpredictable. So when looking at the design of digital interfaces, one can see a lot of commonalities. So starting off with this narrowing of the screen, if you have a look at the design of Facebook's interface on the bottom left there, you can see actually that the content that you view is narrowed within the screen. So your focus is narrowed already. The same phenomenon obviously happens when you're looking at your phone screen, because this is something you view in portrait mode. Then the content is completely unpredictable and you get varying rewards, which means sometimes the content is going to be entertaining, sometimes it is not, you don't know when, and this is what keeps us coming back. The same thing happens when you are constantly refreshing your emails because you don't know if there's going to be something new in your inbox or not. It creates this very compulsive behavior. And furthermore, the content that we're provided with is completely endless. And many platforms are actually designed in order to keep you interacting with them for as long as possible. So one of the methods that does this is autoplay, when the next video on Netflix or on YouTube is played automatically, which doesn't even leave us time to consciously make a decision to continue watching or not. So in conclusion, I hope that these examples show the danger of the design of digital interfaces, the dangers that they can pose. And essentially, this paper just argues for the inclusion of digital design ethics in South African design education as a method of designing the creation of the digital world to serve humans rather than exploiting them. Thank you very much.